Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 63rd episode of Dragon Quest Slime Time, an official Dragon's Den podcast. This is your host, Liamland.
And this is your always tactful host, Pendy.
Pendy, you realize this isn't a Tactfully Die episode, right?
Oh, sorry, my bad. My mind is in Georgia overdrive right now. I saw a bear in the bushes with a bird dog, and now I don't know whether I'm coming or going. This Kojak with a Kodak just got me all flustered. Maybe if I get some go-go juice for my ride, pay the water bill, and get my nightgown on for a bit, I'll be able to hammer down through this podcast.
Okay, I have no idea what you just said, but maybe it has to do with our next guest in trucking. You'll have to slow down, though. Everything I know about trucking, I learned from ice road truckers. And to be honest, most of what I learned was glossed over while I was staring drop-jawed at Lisa Kelly.
This episode is very truck-related. Before I get all ratchet jaw, let me introduce our guest. We would like to welcome the Questing Truck, a.k.a. Andrew Collins, to the party.
Hello, hello.
Welcome.
He did a very creative audio Let's Play of Dragon Quest I for his Questing on the Road podcast series. His podcast series is also unique as he has done each episode from inside his big rig truck between stops as he travels the country hauling goods for his job.
Yeah, this is great because I do have a decent-sized list of trucking-related questions that come to mind while listening to his podcast. So let's get to know our guest.
Yes. So, the Questing Truck, how did you originally get into the Dragon Quest series?
Well, I'm pretty sure, it's been well over 30 years ago I played Dragon Quest 1, and I'm pretty sure I got it through the Nintendo Power thing.
Oh, nice.
You got it for free and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And since then, I've played it. Mostly, I played through played through is a bit much. I have finished exactly one Dragon Quest twice now, but I've not actually finished any of the other ones. But I've played very briefly 2. I've played 3. I've played 4, which is gorgeous. I love 4.
That's one of my favorites too.
Yeah, same.
7 I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed the systems. That's the one where you like go back and past and like reform like these islands. Or is that 7 or is that 6?
Yes,
that's 7. That's 7.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm actually playing that one right now with my son.
I really enjoyed the arc or the just the gameplay loop in that. It's a lot of fun.
Mm.
Played 8. I've played a little bit of 11. And as far as like side ones go, I've played Dragon Quest Builders 1 and 2. 2 more. I like 2 a lot better.
Mm.
And then I played a little bit of that mobile tactical one, where you have the monsters and so forth.
Yes.
I didn't last too long on that one because like a lot of the monsters I liked weren't the good monsters that you could use.
Oh.
So what's your favorite thing about the Dragon Quest series from the games you've played so far?
A big thing is the artwork. Really, it has a very every game it's very similar. I think it's all about who's Armano. Is that who does it?
Akira Toriyama. Yeah.
Toriyama. Okay.
Yeah, the same artist every time. Yep.
I mean, you always know you're playing a Dragon Quest game, regardless. You know, when you go into like Final Fantasy, those can be rather significantly different. There might be a couple things that's the same, but from the music to the artwork, it's just always kind of that same very quaint feel to it. You know, it's not over the top, but it's really cartoony. But I like that. I like that art style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're familiar with Dragon Ball,
it goes from the characters and
it's the same artist as the Dragon Ball series or franchise.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
Mm-hmm. So, do you have any favorite monsters or characters from the series?
Well, my memory's rough as far as like characters go. I know I liked Elena from 4.
That's a classic.
And Kiryu. Yeah, and I know she's really popular, so it's not really a surprise. I don't really know the characters very well. Like I can remember like a couple. I know like 8. You have Jessica, and I can't remember his name, but this guy kind of talks Cockney, has like these weird hair and has big hammers. Yangus.
Yeah. Core blimey.
yeah. He has that. I don't know what it's called. It's like a Cockney accent or something like that.
Yeah,
you got it.
British Cockney accent.
As far as like monsters are concerned, I really enjoy like the Golem. The Golem is one of my favorites. I just like the way it looks.
Yeah.
The Knight Errant type stuff, those look kind of cool too. Although I think the Golem still beats him out. And as far as like cuteness goes, you can't really beat the little slime.
So is there a specific music track that resonated with you as you've been playing?
Like I know later on, like music gets a lot more in depth. Like as I was playing through 1, because one of the things I really enjoy about a lot of these RPGs, especially like the Final Fantasy series, is the music. I love the music from those games. I'll just like listen to the soundtrack. I don't really do that so much with Dragon Quest, but then I don't really know. I've not played enough of like all the games to know like all that there is. So if I was going to limit myself to just the first one, that's the one I've most recently played. Well, of course the fanfare is iconic, but I actually just really like the overworld theme.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh yeah,
It's
definitely.
very. I could listen to it for a long time. It isn't abrasive. It's very passive. It's very calming. I really enjoy it.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
that's one of the best walking themes in the entire franchise, and it's right there in the first game.
Yeah. So now that we've gotten to get to know you a little bit better, we'll get into the meat of this interview. So first of all, it is so wonderful to have you on. I'm a big fan of your series on doing the audio Let's Play of Dragon Quest 1. I heard about it from one of our other podcast hosts, Platty, and decided to give it a try. I had my doubts about it, but I was really pleasantly surprised once I started to listen to it. So what inspired you to start with Dragon Quest 1 for your series?
Well, a lot of it was actually me listening to another podcast as well, Daniel K's Let's Play podcasts, and he did briefly like 3 episodes of Dragon Warrior, and it really made me nostalgic for Dragon Warrior. When I associate Dragon, like if you were to ask me like I'm a fan, I'm probably more of a fan of Final Fantasy than I am Dragon Warrior, but I associate like my childhood with Dragon Warrior a lot more. Being with my cousins and so forth, that's the game we played more. We enjoyed both. It just seems like Dragon Warrior was the one we always played, so it made me really nostalgic for it. But then he stopped doing it. I'm like, well, I wanted to hear more, so I said, well, I guess I can do it. So I'll go play it. I guess I can go ahead and record it. So that's kind of why I started with Dragon Warrior. He stopped doing it, and I wanted to hear it.
Nice. So what drove you to decide to start the podcast? Is just listening to other podcasts? Sorry for the awful pun there.
Well, I drove it. Doing the podcast, it isn't my first rodeo doing something like this. I did YouTube for a very long time. I mean, I was never like one of these superstars like that, but I had a nice little following. But I did mostly BattleTech back then, Mega Mech specifically. And when the transition happened to where I was a security guard forever, and where I was working, basically they were getting rid of the security, and I was in a really dark place back then. That's when I really got into. I finally decided I needed to get back into doing the truck driving. And part of the thing when I went into the truck driving is I kind of couldn't do YouTube anymore. There's just no way to like have the bandwidth I would need to even just upload. And I never really did the streaming or anything like that. So, I kind of regretted not being able to continue that. Although then later on, I started hearing about these, audio only Let's Plays, and that's kind of cool. I can do that while down the road. Just kind of, I enjoyed watching Let's Plays, and it's similar. So then when I decided, man, I really want to play that again, it's like, I could probably do this and actually do content again like I used to. There was a bit of hurdles and having to relearn some things, but that's kind of why I decided to go ahead and do the podcast instead of just playing by myself.
Yeah. I mean, like Pendy said, you kind of go into it with the doubts, because this is my first audio Let's Play as well. I've never come listen to one before without visually seeing it, and it is an incredibly charming. Like, you bring a lot to this podcast. This is it goes beyond expectations in terms of like the amount of charm and creativity that you put into it, including like all those Pendy, you wanted to ask about the little fictional openings.
Yeah, that runs right into my next question, because like one of my favorite parts about your episodes are those little fan fiction openings that you do in the beginning. I'll actually post a sample here for the audience.
The Dragon Lord stepped out onto the balcony overlooking his castle and gazed up at the ever-darkening clouds swirling overhead. Soon his spell would be completed, and the land would be restored to his monster kin. What few setbacks this hero from Tantegel had inflicted were annoying to be sure, but of no real consequence. He touched the amulet around his neck. The sphere of light contained within remained dormant. The spells he had placed on the amulet would continue to sap out of his strength. It wouldn't be long now. With a start, the Dragon Lord jerked his hand away from the amulet. For a moment, the Dragon Lord was bathed in light, and the clouds dissolved for a few seconds. They quickly reformed, however, and the light was again shut away. He carefully touched the amulet once more, but found it cool. That had never happened before. He resolved to reinforce the spells to prevent any such reoccurrence, when out of the corner of his eye he saw a glint. Focusing his eyes in the distance, he saw a strange prismatic path now connected his islands to the mainland. He had seen this before, and equally knew who must have been responsible. With a scowl, he retreated back into his castle to prepare for his guest and put an end to this once and for all.
Where did you get the idea to make those a staple of your episode?
Well, part of it was I wanted to, if I was going to do a podcast, I wanted to stand out a little bit from other podcasts. That's part of it. And the other part of it is I was trying to decide what do I actually want to do with this. It's one thing to just play through the game. Even on like YouTube, you have people, if all you're doing is dryly playing through the game, you're not really adding content to it.
Yeah, you might as well just play the game yourself.
But like one of the goals I wanted to is like you have all these old games, and I kind of think of like for example my dad, he doesn't play games, he doesn't have any frame of reference, but there's like these really cool stories. So I wanted to share the stories, and bring it out a little bit more than what's, especially like some of the first few. There isn't a whole lot in the game that really shares the story, so you have to be a little more creative in those. The other thing I wanted to do, of course, this isn't really associated with like the intros or whatever, but I wanted to make it feel like it was back when at grandma's house. I was playing with my cousins. We're all sitting there at the house and playing video games. And a lot of times, you aren't just if you're just mindlessly grinding, yeah, you're playing, it's in the background, but normally you're just talking about something else. So it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about the way I do the content as opposed to some other places. That's kind of why I do just kind of like chatter a little bit, nothing's really going on.
Oh yeah, and that's great too. Like when you're talking about the little things that are going on with you lately and little updates about what's going on in your life as you're doing the grinding and stuff like that. That was entertaining too.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that on the podcast as well. So did you write the openings in the beginning? And is that the kind of storytelling you mean in terms of like, if you'd be sitting in the background not playing while the rest of your family is? Are you narrating like what they're playing, or how does that work, or how did that work?
Oh, hold on a minute. I'm breaking up. I need to like turn around here. Get back into Turo.
Are you driving right now?
I'm driving my car.
Oh, okay.
He's podcasting. On the road.
We talked about doing it again in the truck. There'd be way too much noise. You wouldn't be able to understand me.
Gotcha.
I think
That's also part of the charm of the podcast, as well as those little, like, all of a sudden you'll be listening and I think your heater will kind of turn on, and it just adds to the atmosphere of like you're listening to a podcast that's being recorded in a truck. This is a unique experience.
In later episodes, you came up with little truck sound effects, like you had the truck driving off at the end that you added on later, and then you also had this convention where, like, if you wanted to skip time, you'd have like a little truck sound effect to show.
Oh, yeah, I remember that too. Yeah.
To indicate to people that time has passed. Yeah.
I did that, and I immediately regretted it because this never really came up. It's like, cause I made a big deal about adding these sound effects. We're going to add it. I think I did it once in that episode. I never did them again. Now, well, the truck driving off though, I think I had that since the very beginning. It's always at the very end. Okay, I think I'm back to a more stable area.
Okay,
what was the question again?
So we were just talking about how you'd be at your grandmother's house and everyone would be playing, but whoever's not playing is telling stories. Are you in that situation? Are you writing down, or are you narrating what's being played?
Well, usually, and we're not doing through or like the intro. So I'm writing them. And a lot of times that would cause delays in the episode because I didn't know what to say. Because originally there was just supposed to be recaps, like what happened before in the last episode. Sometimes not a whole lot happened in the last episode. I walked around and I killed a few monsters. Right. So it started being just whatever I could think of to do. If it was a recap, great. If it was just what was coming up, fine. But mostly I wrote it to just try to kind of, embellish a little bit, but also bring out the story that in a way that the old NES game really couldn't do.
Right.
But when we were kids, and it wouldn't be constantly, sometimes there's something really cool happens, and we just jump up and like start waving our arms and say, man, we just really hit him like this and so forth. It's stuff like that. It wasn't any of these like storytelling, I would say. Just nothing worth writing down anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear what some of the inspiration for all of that came from. So what are you typically hauling in your truck when you're traveling and recording? From the podcast, I think you mentioned something about refrigerator trailer.
Yeah, well, I've recently changed jobs. I'm still a truck I've hauled all kinds of stuff throughout my career. When I worked for rail, I did a little bit of flatbed, which I'd hauled steel, roofing tile, pretty much anything you put on a flatbed.
Mhm.
I didn't like that very long, so I ended up going to dry van for a long time with them. But I hauled all kinds of stuff after that. The paper. Most memorable one is actually I kind of had a falling out with rail where I wasn't very happy with them. They weren't very happy with me. So the last load I hauled for them, I remember, was out of Florida, and it was a load of fertilizer. So the last load was full of crap. So I've worked for other companies too. More recently, when I was doing the podcast, I was working for Swift, and I was on a dedicated route working for Kraft Heinz and Oscar Mayer. So I would haul their goods a lot of times, most of the time, and that was always refrigerated. The reefer wasn't always on, although half the time it was. And it didn't really sound like a whole lot. I remember I was always worried about it in like the episodes. Like, oh man, this might sound really bad. It never really sounded terrible. It was kind of just a little bit of a hum in the background. Is all it really sounded like when it actually finished doing the episode. But it always sounds a lot worse when you're wanting it to be quiet. Now, normally, like if I wasn't trying to record anything, I don't even hardly notice that stuff. But, but now I haul auto parts for Ryder.
Okay. So, it was interesting to hear you figure out the game as you went along because you hadn't played it in a very long time since you had been growing up. And I think you may have mentioned it in your episodes, but did you have to use a guide at all between episodes to figure anything out, or did you do it all on your own? I can't remember.
For the most part, I did it all on my own. A lot of things came back to me, and then there's a lot of things I was just remembering wrong too. Like I could have swore like you had to collect like a bunch of dragon scales and go into that locked room back in Galenholm, and that's where they put it together in like a dragon shield or something like that. It's like I don't know if that's a different Dragon Quest or where I was getting that from. I could have swore that's what we ended up doing, and no, that had nothing to do with what was behind the door in Galenholm. For the most part, I did it myself. I remember looking at when I went through the dungeon and got the warrior ring, I think it was, or the fighter ring. I had no idea what it did. I'd equip it, and like my stats didn't change. Like, well, what does this even do? I had to look that. And then I remember.
I don't remember what that does either. Does it increase agility?
It slightly increases your damage, but it doesn't reflect the stats. I think it just reflects it in the damage. I don't know. I kept it equipped, even though it didn't seem to do anything.
Yeah, there's some items in the game where it doesn't really tell you what it does, and it's like,
the dragon skill is kind of the same way. Although the dragon skill at least raises your defense by 2, and you see it.
Yeah.
So in ice road truckers, where they're driving these massively heavy loads of mining equipment across the ice roads, and the truckers on the show tend to break down relatively frequently. Mostly the mechanical complications are due to like the persistently harsh weather. So seeing all kinds of weather, do you run into many issues with your truck breaking down on the road?
Well, cold has a way of amplifying pre-existing problems.
Mm-hmm.
You go through all summer, there'll be something wrong with your truck, and you may or may not even notice it. But then it gets cold, and all of a sudden, it's a big problem. Batteries is a big one on that. I've never seen Ice Road Truckers. I've seen commercials for it. I've never actually watched it.
I did a job for A&E a while back, so I had to kind of post ads on it. But yeah, I just started to get into it and watched 4 straight seasons in a row. So that's.
I don't think it's something I would want to do the ice road.
Yeah,
I don't even like doing ice here. So
the level of the weights these guys are carrying across these roads and they're pretty extreme. So there was always the danger of someone falling through it. And it's just kind of an on your edge of your seat kind of watch. So
yeah, that's the goal of it.
when you typically when it does happen, what happens with your company and your boss when the truck breaks down? Does that complicate are they blaming you, or are they just kind of writing it off as
no, they're not blaming me. It's like with Swift. I don't really know Ryder's policy yet with it, but Swift, if I had a breakdown, normally first thing I do, I call on road, which that's the number for our maintenance guys, and they would try to get. If I was stranded somewhere, they'd try to get somebody out to me. Sometimes they'd want me to sometimes at worst they would beg me, well, can you make it up to this truck stop? And maybe yes, maybe no. Most of the time, no. I try to work with them as much as possible. It's like I said, it's not my fault. It's just it needs fixed.
Yeah.
And they would get together with a maintenance shop somewhere, and we get my truck in. If it turned out that I it was going to be like more than a day, they would put me up in a hotel somewhere. If it was going to be significant, and it's never happened to me, but I know it happened to some people. If it was going to be there for like a couple weeks or something like that, then they would actually find you a loaner truck.
Mm-hmm.
But no, they never blamed you. It's just, I mean, I'm sure it's irritating for all involved, but it's just one of those things. It's the reality of truck driving. Things break down.
Yeah.
Before
Makes
we
sense.
get back into the game, I did have another kind of related truck driver question. And like, of all the like major chain truck stops, like, do you have like a favorite, like Love's or Flying J, or maybe even I don't know if you've ever been to like a Buc-ee's or anything like that?
Well, Buc-ee's doesn't allow truck driving.
Oh, they don't. Okay.
Well, it's one of those things that really annoys me because you see signs for them everywhere. And my sister, she lives down in Texas. She's going to Buc-ee's all the time. And I can never go there with a truck.
But I'm sorry. What did you say your favorite was?
Petro TA. There's basically the same company, but TAs.
Okay.
And mainly
The
because
TAs.
they have the nice big restaurants in them.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Well,
Okay.
that plus they always have like reserved parking usually, so it would be an easy thing for me to just pull up a TA. The next TA I would come up to, reserve a spot, that I'd be there. Then I get my shower, I get something good to eat, get out of the truck for a while and relax. That's a big thing. You're in that truck so much. You kind of have to take it off every once again.
Yeah, that's another thing that I think I didn't fully appreciate before listening to the podcast, is that you're living in the truck.
Yeah, it was my
when you're
home.
yeah, it's not like you're
I would
stopping at
stay
hotels
out.
every night.
No, not over the road like that. I would stay out for 4 to 6 weeks straight, and come home for like 4 to 6 days.
Gotcha.
So yeah, in that little box is what I lived in. I remember I have my cousin, the same cousin that I played Dragon Warrior with, when I was a kid. He drives trucks as well, and we talk a lot. And we occasionally float the idea of like doing teams, and quickly shoot it down because we like each other, but I don't think we like each other that much. And you're looking at an area that's actually slightly smaller than a prison cell.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, I can leave any time. I'm not a prisoner, but it can get pretty cramped.
I bet.
So what were the most challenging aspects of travel when you were doing this podcast?
Travel or
like just you're traveling while at the same time doing the podcast.
Oh, like what was challenging about the podcast, doing the podcast?
While traveling, like what were the challenging? We have Pendy as a
sound
question.
is a big one.
Okay.
Sound. The sound is a big one because there are a lot of ambient sounds, and also this really isn't really anywhere convenient to set up microphones. Another big one is whenever especially once I started like messing with the switch instead of just having it in my hand and actually having it on the TV and so forth, I basically had to hook everything up. So I get back here in my bunk, and then I have to like hook wires back and forth just to get everything hooked up so I could record it and see it and do it. Then also I'm trying to figure out what to do with the microphone. So it was never static. Like every time I wanted to do an episode, I basically had to set everything up, which sometimes I didn't feel like setting everything up, so I'd go to bed. That happened a lot of times. I'm tired. I drove all day. I just want to go to bed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you also had, I remember from the episodes, you had an incident where you had some troubles with a TV from breaking down, from falling apart,
twice
from the vibrations of the truck.
It happened twice.
Yeah.
The first time, it was just. It was basically, I don't even know how it was staying. I was just hanging on by a thread by the time I finally got home and got it taken off. I basically replaced it with basically the same model. I thought maybe it was just some kind of a flaw in the manufacturer of that one. It had like a weak part, back to it. Well, it started happening to the next one I bought. But I was watching for it too, so I saw it a lot earlier and I caught it. And the final fix was I just had to get a smaller TV, which I think technically is probably more fit for that mount anyway, because where you put it in, the little cubby hole above the refrigerator and below some cabinets, it fit a lot better there. So, the vibration just in general, I'm pretty sure the vibration is also what killed my first microphone. I bought a really nice microphone, and I wanted to get a really high top quality one because I knew I was going to do like that, the parody I did. And also I was thinking I was going to do more parodies. So I got this really nice one. I'm pretty sure it was the vibration that killed it. It didn't take long at all.
Oh, that's too bad. And then I think that like the one other technical difficulty that I can remember that you had to battle with is like just being wary of the truck waking up in the middle of your recording. And I remember like, oh yeah, there's my truck waking up. I remember when you talked about that sometimes.
That's what I was saying though. I think I was worried more about it than it was actually being a problem, because it would do it, and then I would like listen to I would say something, my truck's waking up or whatever I would say, and I would think man, I'm going to have to like go back and check, if it's going to be really bad. And it never was. Well, I think once it was, but I think it was because I had my microphone set in a weird place where the vibration was really like knocking my microphone back and forth.
Yeah, for the most part, it wasn't that big a deal.
Yeah, I think it's just more bigger deal in my head. I'm my own worst critic when it comes to these things.
I understand.
It didn't help that I had some legitimately like real bad problems that some of the episodes just really are. You can't, like, there's one I know you can barely understand it. I just try to salvage it the best I could.
But now, getting back to the game, what do you think were some of the more challenging aspects of the game?
Well, I mean, honestly, I didn't really find it that challenging. I suppose the most challenging thing would be kind of the maze-like structure of the dungeons when you don't really have a whole lot of light. That wasn't like super challenging though. Something frustrating though, something that really irritated me about just the game in general was the design choice to use the limitations of the UI to hide stuff, and not just like optional side stuff. It's like mainline story like stuff. Like you have to like skirt the edge of Tantico Castle to go get the Sunstone. It's like it just seems so corny. You kind of do the same thing. You do the same thing in Rumildar for the magic key, and then you have the door behind Galenholm where you just push against the darkness. Well, no, there's a door there. If you were in there, you would see that that's a completely open path that goes back to behind there. But because it's just the way they designed the UI, it looks like it's a challenge. It's secret, and it's not really. That kind of stuff just really grated on me a little bit. It's not nothing to rage over, but just kind of like,
I remember when you got to Remuldar and the person was like telling you how to get to the fairy flute, and you're like, I got that earlier because there was a shiny spot. Like, there's definitely
the original
like
NES.
That.
There was no shiny spots in the original NES. I remember that's one of the things. Is like, then this is way easier. It's just like there's anything at all, it's a shiny spot. And even when I came across the Mark of Erdrick, it's like I knew that it was down there somewhere in the swamp. I knew I was going to have to go find the clue to get it, and I was going to use the Princess Pledge like I did in the NES. And the part of the problem, I meant to go straight to Catlin Town, and I took a wrong turn, which, as you do in trekking. It's the only way to go the extra mile. But just all of a sudden, just randomly, I was going across that swamp, and a little exclamation part goes above my head. Like, what? I click it, like, oh yeah, right. This is here. I knew this was here. It just startled me that it was just telling me, just straight up.
It's like they didn't think modern audiences were prepared for the challenge of the original.
Well, there is a little bit of that in just gaming in general. It's a lot of games don't do. I don't know if they're necessarily easier, but they don't challenge you mentally, the way they used to.
Yeah, they hold your hand a little bit more than they used to. Dragon Quest XI is a good example of that too, where they tell you like who are the key people to go talk to with the different colors and things like that.
And to a degree, I actually appreciate that because I don't have unlimited time.
And I was gonna say when we had these the original 4 Dragon Warrior games that were released, there was no game facts, so everything was like word of mouth. Like the couple
occasionally there'd be something in Nintendo Power.
Yeah.
Well, I know like 4 came out at the very end of the life cycle of the NES, which I think is why it looked so beautiful to me. It looked really beautiful, and it actually had story, people, characters that were talking to you were playing. I don't think you had that. And I mean, you in 2 and 3, I don't remember them being like active characters. Maybe they are. Like I've not played them, but
I think it was the fourth one was the first one where like every town you go to, there's a problem you need to solve.
And then there's more
staple.
And there's more active things that you do with your character. There's more characterization in general. 2, in 2 there wasn't really so much that you saw from Gwaelin or Kanik. 3, they were all blank slate characters. So you didn't have that at all. 4,
because they were like custom made, basically, weren't they? In 3, other than I guess the main character.
Custom
maybe made. The main character. I don't know.
Yeah, you had the main character, and then you had a party that you got to recruit from Patty's place to, or I forget what it's called, but where you get to go to recruit your characters, and you can choose what class they start with and all that.
You always seem to have like the nameless, the protagonist that never speaks.
Right.
That's another reason I kind of do the intros. It's like you never really hear his inner monologue or what he's thinking. I don't know. Games. That's one thing that actually kind of turns me off to Dragon Quest a little bit, is that the main character has no real personality.
Well, I think it was actually done that way on purpose because the main character
It was.
is supposed to be you.
Yes,
So it's
yeah.
like you are playing the role.
Which I can respect that decision, but when in practice, it just, I remember like Final Fantasy 14 does that too. And they've mercifully kind of gotten away from it in like later expansions. But it's like you're just like this nameless guy. Most he ever does is nod. It's like he never says anything. All this crazy stuff's going on around you.
In 11, they have flashbacks to when he's a child and he talks then. So at some point, I'm like, all right, when did this guy lose his voice?
Yeah. I played a little bit of 11. I think I got as far as the desert area where you do the horse racing. And I remember a really flamboyant guy joins your party. I think that's about the time I stopped playing.
Yeah, Sylvando.
Sylvando. He's a pretty interesting character, especially.
He seemed interesting. I was enjoying the game. I stopped playing mainly because of the TikToks. It's like they're like we're going back to the past, like playing the old games, and I'm sitting there wanting to do the old games. I didn't want to spoil myself, so I said, well, I'll go, naive me. I go back. I'll just play through like all these and then get up to 11. Like I've just done the one. A lot of it's just I severely overestimated the amount of time I have. But I want to go back to 11 because that was a lot of fun.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I'm slowly playing through, 1 through 11 right now with my son. We're currently on 7, which is probably going to take a year because it's like a 200 plus hour.
I heard you saying like your first episode that's like the longest one.
Yeah,
by far. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Just because of all the different content and like there's binders full of all the dialogue that had to be translated on we actually interviewed Justin Lucas, who was part of that project, and I think I remember asking him did you have access to that shelf, and he's like, oh yeah, it was just down the hall from where we were working, or like it was like right over there. And yeah, it was a massive shelf full of binders on every shelf.
I might have to listen to that interview because 7 I really enjoyed. I had it on PlayStation. I really enjoyed that gameplay. You go back in the past, you like solve this problem with this island, then it appears in the future, and you have to go see how did it evolve? What's happening now in the world?
Yeah.
I don't think I ever made it to disc 2 because I had a friend of mine. He did play through and got to disc 2, and he told me at some point like the big bag shows up and he's like getting everybody together. Like and it's what he was describing to me didn't sound all that interesting.
Yeah, I mean you have to power through it. It's because it's particularly with the grinding of the monster, the job classes and the monster job classes, like whichever ones you want. The monster hearts the drops are really low.
That's probably what ended up like stymieing me though. Is the grind? A lot of times in a lot of these games, it's the grind. I'll be enjoying the game, but then all of a sudden it grinds, and then it's like, man, I don't feel like grinding today. So then I don't play it for a while, and then when I decide I do want to play it again, I don't remember where I was, and I don't want to start over. So I ended up never. That's what it was always what happens with these Dragon Quest games. It's like that loop right there. I don't remember what I was doing.
Yeah, starting with 6, I think is like the one you have to like take notes because you can easily get lost in that one or forget, and there's job classes in that one as well. So who did the cover art for your episodes? I noticed one is a picture of a guy driving a truck with a slime replacing his head. Another's a piece of an art of a trucker who I assume is you battling some Drakis in a truck.
Well, there's 2 different people. When I did my first episode and released it, the people over at the Audio Only Let's Play Discord channel have been very supportive of me doing that. And one of them was Bill of Minipod. He does a lot of podcasts. I think the After Years or the Golden Years is the one he's most famous. Well, I don't know, famous. That's the one I primarily think of him as being from. He kind of pushed those because the first thing I had for like the art was just a picture of a slime, basically the same picture he put on the head of that driver. So I asked him, "Can I use that? Because that's actually pretty good." He's like, "Yeah, I'll use it." He actually did too. He did that one, and then he did one I did for my 7th episode where you're running over the Dragon Lord. He's like stuck to your girl.
Yeah, that's right.
Later on, I have a friend. Her name's Yana. And she's actually Russian. She's from Russia. Recently, we finally got her moved to the States. She's engaged to marry another friend of mine, and they got married. They finally got. Yeah, basically they were all set to go. Then the Ukrainian stuff happened. Like, well, that. Oh wow. As you can imagine, complicated all to heck.
Yeah.
Trying to get her out of Russia and here in the States. We finally did get that done, but she did it. She did all that artwork. She asked me what I wanted. She gave me exactly pretty much what I was asking. I think there was only like one or two details. I said, well, this is just slightly different. She did it, no big deal. As far as like that being me, it would be a very young me. I have more gray hair than he does. What I told her to do is, the guy in plaid short here, I gave him a picture of Al Borland, so that's what she did. She did Al Borland.
Oh, okay.
Which I could probably pull off an Al Borland, but that's not really what I would.
Is that Al Borland from Home Improvement?
Yeah, Richard Karn.
Oh, okay, yeah. Richard Karn, right? I was reaching for the memories on that one.
I liked him. I liked him, and like we did Family Feud too. He's a real good guy.
Oh yeah,
that's right.
I remember from that.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, so getting back into going back into trucking. So how did you end up getting into trucking as a career field?
Well, a long time ago, I used to be, I was working at a hospital, and they're basically material distributed, the warehouse underneath it, where we take supplies of the rooms and then, make sure the floors are stocked and so forth. And the part I worked in was I was handling a lot of like the incoming deliveries, and also like first half of my day was that I would stock the internal shelves, and then I would take loads to some of the outlying hospital buildings, across Terre Haute. And I liked that because I'm pretty introverted kind of guy. I don't, I can sit and talk to people for a while, but eventually I just like being by myself, which to me is like perfect. I'd go in my truck, I turn on the radio, I go do my delivery runs, I come back and the day's done. Eventually that job, an outside company, like a third party vendor, was going to take over that part of the hospital management. And I basically had to reapply for my job. And I'm like, I didn't know about that. And then about that same time, there was advertisements on TV for Schneider. And they'd always have like these, the orange truck. Schneider trucks are always those orange trucks. And they'd have them like on the edge of like the Grand Canyon. And everybody's looking out at the Grand Canyon. Like, well, that's malarkey. I know that's malarkey, but it did put it in my head. It would be kind of nice just to go around and see, the world. And plus I like truck driving. So that's why I decided, man, you know what, instead of like doing this, let's just be a truck driver. So this is back in the mid 2000s. Early 2000s, I think 2003. And I worked for several companies then. Unfortunately, I'm also very young back then. I didn't have the discipline to be a truck driver back then. So I was only there for about 3 years. I worked for like 3 different companies. Eventually, I decided I need to get out of this. And I went to school to be an aircraft mechanic. I'm not an aircraft mechanic because I really don't think I would want to be one. Then I was a security guard for about 12 years, and I was like, and eventually that job ended because I don't know if they were going for a different security company or if they were just getting rid of security altogether where I was. I wasn't very happy with it. I finally decided why am I going back into trucking? Because even with security, I worked for Great Dane Trailers. And all I would do all day there was basically ship empty trailers. Some people come in, get the empty trailers, and go ship them out. And then I was basically working for an automotive company. It's actually ironically the same automotive company that I'm working now with Ryder. I'm basically on the other side of it. I'm hauling the parts for Subaru. So that's kind of where I am and why I'm a truck driver. And how I got there.
There were many different cities that you recorded from that you kind of you start off each episode telling us where you are. So, and you mentioned that you're usually gone from home for about like four weeks. So how far do you usually travel?
Well, and a lot of that was me. I had the option if I wanted to. I could come home every 2 weeks. It's just I'm single. I don't need to go home. I go home and see my mom and dad. I like going home and seeing mom and dad and kids and being home, being able to like not be in the truck for a while. But most people don't do it that way. There are some. A lot of people like just to try to do the weekly thing where they only work during the week and they are home on weekends. My cousin, he does that. As far as like how far I've gone, it really depends on the job. With Ryder now, where I'm working, the furthest way I go is 180 miles away. Because I'm expected to come back and be home, I can come back to the same terminal to go home every night. When I was with Swift, usually the furthest way I'd go, well, was with my trainer. He was on the Hershey fleet, and he would do the run from Hershey, Pennsylvania over to Ogden, Utah, which is just north of Salt Lake City.
That's a ways.
That was a good run. I mean, it's just straight there, all on I-80. When I started my change and actually, gotten solo with my own truck, I went to the craft fleet. I would go up to New York, close to like Avon, New York, several places in Pennsylvania. I'd go down to some places in South Carolina, Atlanta, then as far west as Dallas usually, and then up in like Kansas City, I think is about the farthest east I went, or west I went up that way. Now, when I worked for rail, I was a lot more. I was over the road, open board, so they would wherever they sent me. And with that, I've been to the West Coast with them. So, and also they were the ones that sent me up into Canada sometimes.
Okay. So, like, how many hours a day do you typically drive? Like, with what you do now, and like especially during when you were podcasting Dragon Quest One, like how many hours a day did you drive? Because I remember hearing years ago that the max number of hours that truckers could drive got a lot more regulated than it used to be.
Well, it's been regulated. I don't remember when the original regulation happened, but it happened in the 80s or something like that. And I didn't start driving until the 2000s. There were regulations back in the 2000s. I remember when I first started, they actually changed it more to what it is now. But it is regulated. It's you're only allowed to drive in any 8-day period. You're only allowed to drive, and this is going to get a little complicated. It's not complicated once you know it, but it's kind of complicated to explain. At the start of my day, I'll go on duty, and everything's ELD now, so it's all on like a tablet. I push the on duty button, and the timer starts right there. There's a 14-hour clock.
Uh-huh.
Now, 14 hours, no matter what I do, if all I do is sit there all day and on duty, after 14 hours, I'm not allowed to drive.
Uh-huh.
Now, if I do drive, within that 14-hour period, I can drive at most 11 hours.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
After that, you're in violation. And also, after 8 hours, regardless of what you're doing, you have to take a 30-minute break.
Mm-hmm.
But on duty time will count for that. So you could be off duty, you could be in a sleeper, or you could be on duty. Like you feel a lot of times I would take the opportunity when I'm fueling up to do my 30-minute break right there.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also an additional requirement where at any 8-day period, you can only work up to 70 hours.
Gotcha.
So what I would tend to do when I was over the road is I would space it out so I never had to take a reset. Because the only way to get around like that 70-hour rule, like let's say you did 70 hours in 5 days, which is easily doable. I almost do that now with Ryder. If you take 34 uninterrupted offline and or sleeper berth time, it resets that clock and you can drive. So, but I never like taking the resets because I would just as soon drive and then have time off at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the time I would try to space it out to where I was doing 8 to 9 hours a day.
Okay.
Now that sometimes loads didn't account for that. Sometimes you had to, sometimes you would drive less and sometimes you drive more. Now with Ryder, I have a very set route I do, and now I can bid on different routes. Like, when it comes time to bid, I can get a slightly different route. But the route I have right now, it's on paper 13 hours. It normally takes me about 12 hours. And that's Monday through Friday, and that's about all I get to do because I'm super tired by the time I get home.
Makes sense. So I know at one point during the recordings, somewhere in the middle of the podcast, you contracted COVID. Was it challenging? How challenging was it doing your job during the height of COVID?
Well, yeah, COVID. As far as like my job, especially with Swift, I hauled food. It didn't affect me at all.
Okay.
They wanted me to haul food. It was nice. It was kind of nice as like all the traffic was gone. That made it nice. The four-wheelers are staying home. Now the downside was, like a lot of times, like my days, I would find like like I mentioned, a TA or Petro, they'd have a nice restaurant. Well, not during COVID. Everything's shut down, and a lot of them never recovered. There's some of them that just never opened back up.
Oh, that's too bad.
I mean, so that was that effect. I mean, as far as actually getting COVID, I didn't get it during the height of. I got it the year after, and I had it for about 4 days before I decided, I'm too bad to even work it. I was fighting through it, and eventually it got to the point where I could just barely move. I'm like, I think I might need to go to the hospital. But that's me. That's also why I lost my toe. It was like, I'll fight through it. Well, no, it probably wasn't the best idea to try to fight through that. But, and part of that is being on the road, though. It's like I don't have people around me. I can't just easily go to the doctor just on a whim. So, that's actually one of the reasons I've made the change to the job I now have is kind of for health reasons. Not only in an emergency situation, but also just generally health-wise. When you're sitting in a truck, you balloon up. I mean, I'm a big guy now. I've always been kind of big. I mean, I'm not a super active guy or anything like that, but you really get big in the trucks. If you don't do something about it. And
having like a daily route when you're coming back home, I imagine that would give you more flexibility to do appointments or whatever you need to take care of.
Depending on when you're doing it, yeah, that's another thing. What I used to do is like I'd let my home time. Like I said, I only come home like every other month. Right. I would line up all of my doctor's appointments for when I'm home. So basically, anytime I go home, it's just a series of doctor's appointments, doctor appointment. Yeah. So that kind of like sucked some of the fun out of being home. But it was nice to be able to do it. It was always nice to have that flexibility too, where I went home when it was time. These are my doctor appointments. They never had any single issue with getting me home when I needed to get home. So.
Oh, that's good. That's good. But switching gears again, the song parody that you created near the end of your podcast run on Dragon Quest One was fantastic. How did you come up with the idea for doing using that song and then putting in your own Dragon Quest lyrics to it?
Well, parodies are really fun. I used to be a big fan of Weird Al Yankovic. I used to love his parodies. And initially, with that song, as initially thought of, it has no semblance to what it became. But initially, I was thinking, man, I'm doing this podcast. There's going to be times where I'm just sitting there grinding. I don't want to do a grind, but maybe I could do a montage song. And I remember the montage song from Team America World Police.
Yeah,
that was in my head. So I'd start working on a little bit of lyrics like that, and then I came to I couldn't remember the song very well. So I played the song, and the song that they played had no semblance what was in my head. And what I've come to realize is I was doing the montage song to the main theme of World Police. So I was like, I don't know how it transitioned over to Convoy. I used to listen to Convoy every once and again. I think what must have happened is I had that in my idea. I was wanting to do a parody, and I was listening to Convoy, and probably during the Convoy, one of those lines, one of those lyrics went and got in my head and got stuck in my head. I was like, okay, I like this. And it actually is thematically appropriate for the podcast being the Convoy. So that's kind of where it started. And then it started just ballooning, and I started trying to actually write it and figure it out, try to make it lyrically rhyme, when it needed to. And while I'm doing that, several other parodies came to mind. There's 4 or 5 more I want, it's in my head that I want to do. I don't really have one for Dragon Quest 2 yet, though. Because I don't know enough about Dragon Quest 2 to do one. But well, Dragon Quest 1, I more or less knew the story. Matter of fact, I realized after I was done, it wasn't really a montage so much as I just basically sang the entire story of Dragon Quest 1. It's from beginning to end, because it just isn't that complicated of a story.
Yeah. But it was really clever, because the refrain is talking about the grind, and then you kind of mix in the story.
I think there might have been a little bit of influence from, there's a song in Yakuza Like a Dragon, which if you like Dragon Quest, there's a lot of Dragon Warrior references in that.
Oh, yeah.
But they do a song in a karaoke called I Want to Level Up. I think there might have been a little bit of influence in that too.
Yeah.
I really like that song too. If I ever do a playthrough of that, I'm gonna just straight up sing it in a karaoke style.
There you go. Nice. There you go. Love it.
So you started a contest to write a story about how Gwaylin and the hero fell in love after the hero rescued her. Did you get any submissions and pick a winner?
I had 4 submissions.
Nice.
I do know who the winner is. I didn't do the podcast yet, partially because I wanted to do. There's a lot of reasons. It'd probably be boring for me to go through all of them. But part of it is also this transition, though, with going into this different job. Because right now I'm home. I can't record. The reason I'm in my car right now, recording with you guys, is I can't record at home right now. That was always a problem even during, when I was the other job. But every time I'd have home time, I can't record. I there's just nowhere to do it, no time to do it, no privacy. So now recently, matter of fact, just before I started talking to you guys, I've actually got myself hooked up to do an apartment here in Terre Haute. Once I get settled into that, I'm hoping to get back into all of this stuff. Actually have a set place where I can record. I want to lose that ambiance of actually having, being in the truck, but I'm still, I can still have some stuff to do. But it's, another part of it was I'm actually, one of the submissions really was on the edge of being what I would accept.
I remember you kept trying to warn people about let's be appropriate.
Yeah. I might have to pull out the truck horn for a couple parts of that one. He wasn't overly crude. He was riding that line. Yeah. One of them I almost wanted to do a parody of because it was just so off the wall and funny. And I actually started looking at it I don't know how I would do this. So I didn't end up doing it, but I did actually want to do a parody for it. And that's another thing that was kind of stopping me from getting it done. I was working on another parody. Mm-hmm. But the one that won, it's short and sweet, and it's actually exactly he followed instructions. He did exactly what I was asking him to do. So nice. The other submissions, they were good, they're fun. They were creative, they just weren't really what I was after. So
well, that's cool. I look forward to hearing your future podcast announcing that and incorporating.
Yeah,
that,
and I'm going to read them off. I'm going to read them all off, so you'll hear what they are. I'm not wanting to give too much details because I've not actually done the
Nope. No, understand. Don't want to give away spoilers. That's great. But so for Dragon Quest One, what would be your overall impression of the game now that you've completed it recently? And feel free to be brutally honest, because we know that what you played is a good remake, but it's still a very old game.
Well, you're right. It is a very old game. It shows its age, but one positive I would say about Dragon Quest One is because it's so short, you don't really have time to get bored with the fact that it's an old game. It's just you kind of go through it. It's really quick, very simple story. There's not much to it. If you just want to I'll play around with, especially in the remake where the graphics are a little bit better. You kind of have the more modern versions of the monsters, although they're named weird sometimes. Was that just me, or is that actually something weird about the remake?
Oh,
that was the remake.
There've been several different localization styles for what they name everything that it's hard to keep track of from over the years. It was different. They started out with different names in the Dragon Warrior games, and then they've switched over to different names and third names and fifth names. And I'm exaggerating, but yeah, it's definitely different in what you played to what you played as a kid.
Yeah. Well, I knew in the in terms of the spells, you'd have the hurt more and hurt spell.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's sizzle and sizzle now, but that sizzle and sizzle is actually consistent with everything that comes after.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's some of the names of the monsters is that isn't what that is. Sometimes it was, and sometimes it wasn't. It was very, very strange.
Yeah,
it's kind of doubting myself. Going through it.
The wyvern and the chimera.
Mm-hmm. And also the mages, the ledgermen or mages or whatever. I don't think that's. Of course, I don't even know if those are in other ones, because there is your standard warlock or whatever that's in kind of common in ones later.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they called them prestidigitators or something like that.
Yeah, it was just a really weird name.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, but overall, I wouldn't never say this is the greatest thing ever. Go play this. But if you just want something quick and short, and it's also this is the granddaddy. This is where a lot of RPGs come from.
Exactly.
Just from that standpoint, it's worth a playthrough, I think.
Yeah.
And like I said, the remake is easier, so it's not even, you kind of remove even that complication, because the old game was a lot more brutal.
Oh, yeah,
I don't remember it being anywhere near this easy.
Yeah, I played through it recently, and I was like, oh my god, I've been spoiled by all the remakes over the years.
I still love the original, because it really just takes me back to childhood when I was 10 years old. I played it for the first time.
Yeah.
So yeah. So you mentioned that you might do Dragon Quest 2 in the future. Are you planning on podcasting through the entire mainline series at some point?
It is the original plan. I don't know how well I'll be able to do it. I wanted to continue doing them. Matter of fact, I even little Easter egg at the end of the song about it. I'm doing 2. But yeah, I want to do 2. I want to do 3 for sure. Although at this point, I might actually have stalled long enough to actually get the 3D remake of it, the 2D 3D one.
Oh yeah, you could. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Probably.
We
have no idea when it's coming out yet, but we're thinking that since it's gonna be the 35th anniversary of the game next year in Japan, anyways, when it came out in Japan, that we're thinking that it might come out sometime during that year.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested in that. I remember 3 being a lot of fun. I remember 2 not being so much fun.
2 can be rough for some people. Yeah.
Is the remake better?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It has some improvements for sure. And one of the there were some things in it, like Kanik would die pretty easily, and that was a long running joke, and they beefed him up a bit and made some other things a little bit better, but it still can be a little challenging, especially the very end of the game and going to the infamous cave of Roan and places like that.
Did they fix the fact that Roan, which I think is called something different in the remake, but you get to this icy kind of wasteland at the end, and several of the monsters there that you fight are the hardest in the game, and they have unblockable death spells.
Still there. You can still get
that's still there. Did they didn't give you, because in 3 I think they give you a give life rock or something that you can just have in your possession that kind of cancels out an instant death spell.
Yeah, which they've had ever since then, but I don't know if it's in the remake for 2. I don't think it is. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Feel free to correct me after.
That's something to look forward to. At least you have more people around to not game over immediately.
Yeah, and that's the other thing.
Only one of the death spell.
Yeah, and only one of the characters in the original had revive to revive one of your dead party members.
Yeah.
In the remake, you have both of your party members, Kanik and Gwaelin, can do revive, so that helps too.
Yeah. So that's what was brutal about the original too, is that the only guy with the revive spell is always usually the first to die.
Yeah.
You keep saying Gwaelin and whatnot. are they named in 2? Because I remember in 1 I had to like do research to like find the quote unquote official name of the hero.
I think you might be mixing it up with
I am.
Pendy. Did you say Gwaylin? Gwaylin is
I'm mixing up a little bit of a but thou must Dragon Quest 1 princess. I meant to say, so the way they're named, they have like random names that they give them, but it's
Moonbrook.
Princess of Moonbrook and Princess of Prince of Canik and Princess of Moonbrook is how you would normally refer to them, because the game gives you like random names.
But to your defense, the name that I got on my first playthrough was Kaylin.
Oh, really?
So it's very similar to Gwaylin.
Yes.
Well, because I remember I did some preliminary looking up for like the names of, and there is like apparently there's a Japanese dramatization of some of these.
There is,
which would be very interesting. Although I don't speak Japanese, I've kind of been trying to learn it, but it actually kind of brings up a question, because when I was doing the research, like I know the state the Princess of Moonbrook is in when you first meet her now, which I didn't know before. Mm-hmm. I'm not super picky about spoilers and whatever, but is there anything going forward in any of the games that you would like hesitate, like, don't look too deeply into this because it'd be a fun surprise or something like that?
Certain characters sometimes. Because sometimes you might have someone that like you think is going to be your main character party member, and then he leaves, and then you never see him again, which I won't say what game. Or you might have someone like, oh, this character's great, and then they die, and then they don't necessarily come back unless you do post game. So there's stuff like that happens.
And sometimes they don't come back at all.
Right.
Yeah, it depends if they're.
I imagine I'll do less research as once I get into like 4 and like the characters kind of have their own in the game. I don't have to like look up who they are. So I'll probably get away with it a lot more. We get away from that a lot more once I actually eventually get there. And, although I don't know how I'm going to do 4, 5, and 6. Because I don't want to do it on mobile phone. So I don't know how I'm going to do those.
It's actually not too bad, particularly 4, because starting with 7 and then future remakes started to have this, starting with the Zenithia trilogy, was that they added party chat. And it's essentially just like you hit the talk button when you're not standing in front of anyone, and your party members just kind of like talk about what they're thinking, based on what some of the NPCs just said, or like where they are, and sometimes it'll be like is lost in thought, which means they don't have a dialogue box for the current
That's
state.
Pretty cool.
But yeah, it fleshes out the personality. So the DS version of 4, for some reason they removed it, but they put it back in there in the mobile version. So 4 is actually one I would recommend to play on mobile.
I have it. Matter of fact, I had played a little bit of it on 4. The problem I had on the mobile or on the tablet is the controls just feel wonky.
Yeah.
Like moving you around. Like I almost want to find a controller somehow.
I do. Yeah, I do remember. I do remember like accidentally going up and down stairs when I didn't want to a lot. Sorry, Pendy, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, yeah, there is a learning curve to playing the games on mobile, but once you get over that learning curve, which doesn't take too long, then it's actually not that bad, because I had some difficulties when I first started playing the mobile games. But then after I got used to it after a while, I was like, oh, this is actually not that bad. This is great.
Yeah. And the original.
I've got some time to figure it out.
I love 4, the original, but by the time you get to chapter 5, the original doesn't really handle the AI controlled party members well, because it doesn't give you full control. And then starting in, I think it was maybe 5, you get the option to like give orders to everyone, but in the original for 4, you by chapter 5 they're like, okay, you no longer control these characters, we're going to do all the attacks and spells and stuff. So that can be difficult, and it really is night and day when you play the remake for 4. You get that full control, then you really can tackle the bosses the way you want to.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I would expect. That's kind of surprising they didn't have that to begin with. It seems like that's the easier option, just let the player control it.
Yeah, and thankfully in starting with 5 and then in the future remakes, they added it back in.
It was something unique they came up with for the NES, where they decided that, hey, you could get to control your hero no matter what, but then once you gather all your characters in the final and 5th chapter, then you're going to go into coaching mode. You're just going to tell them like different methods of attack or defense to use and just let them go at it. So it was something they were experimenting with back in the day.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. It's an interesting experiment.
Yeah. But it kind
of reminds me a little bit of like a proto version of the Gambit system from Final Fantasy 12.
Yeah, but the AI wasn't there yet for like the Famicom NES era. So you have like Bray just spamming ice spells and they're failing on like on a boss that's like not that strong against ice, or they're
Or you had-
not buffing the characters like you want. They're not casting oomph,
Or you
which
had,
would be super helpful.
Or you had Curl. You were talking about Alina and Curl being one of your favorite characters, or Christo Curl, depending on the version you're playing. He was infamous for using his thwack spell against people to try and do the instant kill and to no avail. Even on bosses,
he'd be like using it against bosses and stuff. He's like, "What are you doing?" But you.
That's one of those things we as players, whereas like your character, I'm like, I have this really cool spell to instantly end this, and it ain't working. No.
Yeah. they do make fun of that in the Heroes games a lot. I think his coup de grace is like him trying to cast it over and over again and failing.
I have played the first Heroes game. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the first Heroes game. They have a second one now, too, don't they?
Yeah. I haven't gotten to play that one as much because it was released around the time my son was born, and now my PS4 has since died. So I have it, and I'm looking forward to playing that and Builders 2, which came out around the time my daughter was born. So I do have this
Builders 2 was
game.
a lot of fun. Builders 2
Yeah,
was a lot of fun.
I did get like a fraction of the way through it, and then I had to stop due to like life events.
I think I did the first 2 islands, and I got to a point where I was supposed to be like there's like that big creative island where everybody kind of gathers, and they were building a pyramid, I think, and they were wanting to help. But I didn't know how to get them to help me. I got very confused and frustrated, and I think that's where I stopped playing it.
Yeah. So one of the things you were talking about in terms of like wanting in terms of like spoilers and everything. Just the one thing I will say is like every time you see Puff Puff, because I noticed you mentioned this in one of your episodes, and you're like, I'm gonna have to guess what that is. That is like I think it's a Toriyama inside joke about like a boob massage on the face. And that's been
there's a GIF around of like the Final Fantasy VIII character, like has 2 slimes on each side. And it's kind of
the DQ8 so they've been kind of making jokes about what that is. The first time I saw that was in
they had like the 3Ds now. I guess do they just like fade to black whenever you do the puffs now?
Sometimes,
some
like
of the
in
games,
Heroes. Yeah, because they want to leave it up to imagination, but I think that's the origin of what it is. But like,
I said, I could be rather crude about it and like guess at what just happened there. If I was going to be wholesome, she got like a bunch of like makeup puffs, just puffing you like ASMR style or something.
I think that's how it was originally interpreted in the Dragon Warrior 3, which is the first time we would have seen it. But
it was in the original Dragon Warrior. I remember the puff being in the original.
I don't think it was in Dragon Warrior 1, was it?
No,
Unless it was added to the remakes.
They took it out. If it's there, it's something else entirely. But it got censored out of the Dragon Warrior NES one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe
it's in the remakes though.
But no,
it's in the remakes though.
It's in also starting with Dragon Warrior 3. It is definitely in the remakes, but yeah, in the original, we first saw it in Dragon Warrior 3.
Yeah.
In the town of Ashram.
Yep. Where you get fooled.
Yeah, but it's the Tuffy guy, the roughneck, the guy with the bullhead helmet. Which is it's hilarious because then they do like throwbacks to that in some of the future games and in 11 they have like I think there's like at least one Puff in every town, and they're all unique. Like they're all like some kind of parody of it, and it's
in 11.
Yeah, I think you get like an accolade for finding all of them.
And there's like a PlayStation trophy.
Where that bastard tried.
And one of my favorites is like the very last one, which I won't spoil, but it's fantastic. It's so funny.
Yeah, they're all they're jokey versions of it. It's a lot of fun.
Which is it's one of those things you kind of have to have fun with it if you're going to do it.
So
it is one of those things that like touches on like a topic that you wouldn't normally like. A lot of Dragon Warrior is kind of child friendly, like the art style, things that's going on. It's very child friendly. Then you have that, like what?
Yeah, it's because when the games in Japan came out, like they weren't like meant to be for little kids. It was more of a, I guess maybe family and on up kind of thing. So it had some serious stuff that was in it. But like Akira Toriyama's art is more kind of, I don't want to say kiddie, but it's a little not as harsh as some of the other, more
Yeah,
realistic.
it's not like someone.
art.
He wasn't going for super realism. He was
Right.
he has his style, and it's a good style. Yeah. I know what you mean. I don't want to say it's kiddie necessarily, but it's just cartoony a little bit,
Yeah.
which is fine. Which is actually kind of nice. It's kind of a nice departure to get away from the realistic looks sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's
I
nice
think
to have
that's
something
why
different.
it's been so powerful, or in Japan, so massive a franchise there. Is
I've
that
wondered about that.
cutesy
Is
look to it.
I've wondered about that because I remember reading, and it's true with me. Like in the United States and the West, Final Fantasy is like by far the more popular, whereas in Japan, I know they go nuts for Dragon Warrior.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's like, and I one of my challenges is like, why is that exactly? What is it? Why? What? It's social. What cultural difference is it that makes that difference? I don't.
There's just so many. It's not just like one reason. That's part of the problem. It's so many layers to it, and a lot of those layers happen with the fact that we got the game so much later than when they came out in Japan. Like the first one we didn't get in America until like 3 years after it came out in Japan, and lack of marketing and just no Dragon Quest games at all during the Super Nintendo era. Like we got none of them.
Yeah.
Lots of different things happened. Perfect storm.
I remember I forgot all about Dragon Quest until I just happened to see 7 in the store one day. Oh, really?
Yes.
I remember those.
Yeah, a lot of people. Yeah. And then like 7, a lot of the Dragon Quest games are graphically very impressive, especially like 4 on the NES. That's one of the best NES games you can get. Or like 11 looks really good, 8 looks really good on the PS2. But then they had 7 on the PS1, and then you had 7 that kind of looked more like a Super Nintendo game, and then you had Final Fantasy 7 that, at least back in the day, looked very modern. So that didn't help either. So there's
it did. I remember 7 back then. I mean, people joke about it now, but when you lived back there, I still to this day know why. It's just so much more impressive.
So yeah, just lots of different things like that came together that did hurt Dragon Quest over the years. That it just never took off as much as Final Fantasy did over here in the West.
Yeah. But one of the reasons why I like it better than Final Fantasy, I mean, it's just the combination of, again, like the art style, Yuji Horí's storytelling, the way the music ties everything in, and you're really kind of immersed in this medieval fantasy, and it's consistently a medieval fantasy for the most part. There's a couple of variants where they're driving a car, or like like they're in space or something like that on some of the spin-offs, but but for the most part, especially in the mainline series, it's all medieval fantasy, and it's just a fantastic world to be a hero in.
I think part of it with me is I haven't had a whole lot of experience with Hoji's storytelling yet. Like I said, I played 1. There isn't much of a story there. 2, I know, doesn't really have much of one either. 3, I think, is like one of the most. I know 3 was big. It probably does have a bit of a story to it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, a little bit, but there's still towns where you don't have to solve problems in them. They're just kind of there for like, for either like rest stops or
world building,
or that, like, or just like, weapon shops that might have.
I like the big thing like Comb in like 1, like this serves no purpose.
Yeah. But then
other than
then
I guess
have
the fairy flute, which I don't even think you even need.
You use it to make the golem sleep so you can attack them.
Yeah, but I don't know what the point of that was. By the time I got around to Catlin Town, and maybe just because I was over leveled for it, I was like, I just felt like I was wasting my time putting him to sleep.
Did you fight him without it? I don't remember.
No, I fought him with it. I did it because this is the big moment. I've had this fairy flute this entire game. I want to use it now. He went to sleep for 1 turn, and it didn't matter.
But yeah, I actually forgot what I was talking about too.
No, that's good. That's fine, because let's go into the other podcasts that you have. And after you finished Dragon Quest 1, you ended up going on to play, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, because I'm bad with that, Valkyria Chronicles.
That's about what I would say. Valkyrie Chronicles is what I say. I don't know the exact pronunciation either.
We can all
it's the same podcast. It's a different game.
Exactly. So you started doing that game. Do you plan to continue that game that you've started? I know you had to stop because of all the stuff that was going on with your life, but do you plan to pick that up again?
I do. I was really enjoying it. And one of the things reason I started that is I wanted to actually have one that was concurrent with Dragon Quest II, but I wanted to have something that's weekly, and it's very easy for me to just do an episode of Valkyrie Chronicles because it kind of has a really easy start and stop point. You do a mission. Whereas with Dragon Quest, when I do Dragon Quest 2, like when I did the Dragon Quest 1, I wanted to be able to like take my time, edit, like do the intros, do the fun stuff I want to do with that episode, and do and go that way. Now, one thing I did find out that I needed to get like a video converter, which is going to be really nice when I do go back to Dragon Quest, because the sound's going to be a lot better. Because I'll be recording straight from the game instead of like from my TV into the microphones the way I was doing it.
Nice.
But yeah, I definitely want to do that. I was even actually halfway tempted to kind of do it the way NoCat does it and actually record the video and actually maybe put the video up on YouTube as well, but still do it in the audio Let's Play format. So I'm still basically speaking, but if you wanted to like look over and see what was actually going on, you could. But that was more complicated than what I could do in the truck, so I never ended up doing that.
Gotcha. So you mentioned NoCat. Are there any other podcasts you would recommend to us that you like?
Well, I have a broad interest, so I'll confine myself to gaming. NoCat is definitely one. No one can know about this podcast. They do Final Fantasy. They do an amazing job at it. They're very good at it. Another audio-only Let's Play podcast I listen to, really enjoy, is Skeleton House. He kind of alternates back and forth. He does like some horror, suspenseful ones. I'm not super interested in those, just because I'm just personally not interested in that genre. But he's done a Super Mario RPG one, which is really good, and he's currently doing Chrono Trigger, which is fun.
Nice.
Outside of that, I listen to Speakers of Heidelin for Final Fantasy 14 news. I listened to a couple actual plays of one of them is Critical Hit, and they did an actual play of Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition, and they're currently moved on because they did complete campaign all the way through. They're currently now doing Starfinder, which is the other one. Is Cosmic Crit is another one I listen to. That's a Starfinder podcast. And the only other one, last one I'll recommend to people is called the Triforce podcast, and it's Lewis Brindley, Pyrian Flax and Sips from the Yogscast. They're basically just talking about life. What have they been doing last week? Now that one, Skeleton House, and no one can know about that. Sometimes they can get a little bit crude in the language, so that's a little bit departure from what I do. So I just like to give people a heads up about that. But they're still very good. They're all in like the Triforce. It's just fun. It's just funny. But those would be ones I'd recommend.
Oh, great. I appreciate your time. What's the best way to reach you if fans want to contact you, and where can they find your podcast or any of the other projects that you might be doing?
Right now, the best way, honestly, is email, because I get a notification that someone sent me an email. Now, I guess eventually I would turn that off if I got into Deluge. But questingtruck@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter. That's a really good way to do it, @questingtruck on Twitter. And also just on Discord, if you ever join the audio-only video game Let's Play server. I have a little channel in there. That's also, plus I'm just in there. You could message me from just inside there. That would be another way. As far as other mediums, technically I still have my YouTube channel, and I may well pick it up again. Currently that's under the name Thomas Merrick, but you look up like Let's Megamech, and that you'll find my channel. Right. So if you're interested in BattleTech stuff, I guess go there. There's lots of BattleTech content right there.
Awesome.
Well, that's it for this episode of Slime Time. We want to thank the Questing Truck for joining the party. Definitely check out Questing on the Road podcast. Whether or not you've played Dragon Quest 1, the audio podcast, Andrew's descriptions and narrations really put you in the game. Like, that's one of the things I really liked about this audio Let's Play, is just like understanding and visualizing exactly where he is in the game, on the map, in the story. So definitely check it out.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was great.
No problem. I thought it was fun.
Awesome. So, Honk, if you love free stuff, we do too. We will always load out this quality content about the game series we know and love for free. If you do have any money that's itching for a road trip, and you would like to donate to a website that's been supporting Dragon Quest fans for over 20 years, stop by the Dragon's Den at www.woodus.com/den and click on Support This Site. Woodus has owned and maintained the Dragon's Den DQ fan site for decades, and he personally edits every YouTube version of our podcast. He fully appreciates any donations to help keep the servers running.
And the Dragon's Den website also features Amazon affiliate links. If you click the link and make a purchase, a small fraction of the sale will go to support the den, and it doesn't cost you anything. To advertise with us, reach out at slimetimepodcast@gmail.com.
Don't forget, we have a Slime Time t-shirt you can buy by our resident artist, Delicious Dwayne. See the link for it in the show notes.
If you have any comments or questions for the Dragon Quest Slime Time podcast, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram @DQ Slime Time.
Consider joining in tons of Dragon Quest discussions at the Dragon's Den forums, one of the oldest surviving forums on the internet. Find it from the Dragon's Den main page or at www.woodus.com/forums. You can also find us and other rabid DQ fans through the Dragon Questers, Infinity Strash, and Dragon Quest Tact Global Facebook groups. We'd love to see you there.
Or come hang out with us and tons of other hardcore Dragon Quest fans on the officially unofficial Dragon's Den Discord server.
We'd like to thank everyone that made this possible, like Woodis for his support of the series, this podcast, and keeping the Dragon's Den lights on for decades. We'd also love to thank everyone out there in the trucking industry. We appreciate your hard work hauling all of our much-needed and or wanted goods all over the country.
Thanks to Amanda Lepre and the Descends of Erdrick for allowing us to use their music for our podcast. Descends of Erdrick is a video game tribute band from Austin, Texas. Check them out in their album Advent at www.descendsoferdrick.com or on Twitter at @DofErdrick. And Amanda Lepre has a Twitch streaming channel featuring playthroughs of many of the classic NES and SNES RPGs. Please like, subscribe, and write a review for the podcast. If you're looking for more Dragon Quest Slime Time, check out our earlier episodes on Dragon's Den, Anchor FM, Apple Podcasts, Audible, YouTube, and more. And check out our brothers and sisters in arms over the Slime Time, Side Quest, and Tactfully Die podcast. Their latest episodes are available now.
Bye, everyone.
Dragon Quest Slime Time, sliming off.
Record 19, this here's the questing truck. You got a copy on me, Hero? Come on. Yeah, Hero, 10-4, for sure. Seems we're good, straight to Alfgard, come on. Yeah, that's a big 10-4 there, Hero. We're definitely going through some woods. Mercy's sakes alive, looks like we're grinding us some levels. We rolled on into Castletown, and things didn't seem quite right. Seems this lad called the Dragon Lord had stolen the Sphere of Light. The people there were quite distraught, as when he fled the scene, he took their princess to the east, intent to have a queen. We're gonna grind some levels, questing through the night. We're gonna grind some levels, we just gotta go out and fight. Come on, let's grind those levels. If you want to beat the Dragon Quest, then we gotta grind those levels till our stats can pass the test. Levels. Hey, Hero, this here's the question truck. You doing all right back there? Yeah, you might want to hurry it up. This swamp's getting real intense up here. We headed on to Rimuldar to secure some magic keys. We'd need to break into a lock to secure the girl's release. A dragon tried to block the way, but after his defeat, we saved that princess sweet and fair and swept her off her feet. We're gonna grind some levels, questing through the night. We're gonna grind some levels, we just gotta go out and fight. Come on, let's grind those levels. If you want to beat the Dragon Quest, then we gotta grind those levels till our stats can pass the test. Levels. Hey, Hero, can you give me a 10-9 on that? Yeah, that's right. Just stick the flute into the exhaust and we'll tweel our way right into Catlin Town. Our quest took us across the land into the deepest tombs. Some treasures lay behind the golem and others in secret rooms. Each new treasure we discovered made our troubles grow by the day. Endless monsters followed us and tried to block our way. There were pesky ghosts and slimes and wolves and bugs of every size. Gigantic dragons breathing fire and drakes filled the skies. The king was begging caution, but I didn't think it'd be so hard, with 3 wise sages by my side and an amateur Galen home bard. Hey, Spony One, you got a copy back there? Yeah, see if you can head back to the end and maybe work on a victory song. Yeah, one of the sages is getting agitated and he can use all the practice he can get. When rain and sun did chance to meet, it made a rainbow road. I crossed that sucker blazing fast, I'm sure I passed up Toad. The Dragon Lord was getting nervous and tried to change his luck. Seems the rake had an offer to make, but a deal isn't what got struck. We're gonna grind some levels, questing through the night. We're gonna grind some levels, we just gotta go out and fight. Come on, let's grind those levels. If you want to beat the Dragon Quest, then we gotta grind those levels till our stats can pass the test. Levels. Yeah, 10-4 here. What's your 20? The chapel getting married. Well, good on you, I guess. Well, mercy's sakes, good buddy. I'm gonna get on out of here. Next next time I'm back this way, I'll be sure to swing by and visit the family. Well, catch you on a flip-flop. This here's the Questin truck. We gone. Bye-bye.
Anything if you want to go from just a beginner to a pro. You need a montage. Ooh, it takes a montage. Always fade out in a montage. If you fade out, it seems like more time has passed in a montage. Montage.
This is Gertrude for Slime Time, reminding you all that you must complete your adventure.